Alright guys, today we are going to be reacting to Andrew Wilson versus Feminist who thinks men can be cured from this. Let's jump in.
Body count itself outside of marriage, easy one to point to because it's just always universally in basically every Christian denomination going to be considered non-virtuous behavior, right? It's going to be considered a violation of the ethical purview of Christians themselves. So it's an easy one to point to. And I haven't actually heard a refutation to that. Just, yeah, but there could be other factors you could point to as well. It's like, yeah, maybe, but I haven't heard why this one should actually be trivialized.
I'm not saying that it should be trivialized. And that's like, I think there's some Christian men, and probably a lot of them, who probably should value the people who have their similar ideals about like intercourse with people. I think there are a lot of men who are Christian who should do that. And I think there's a lot of Muslim men who should do that. And I'm just saying that when the body count discussion is framed as this is an immediate disqualifier of somebody, I think that removes all of the nuance out of dating and relationships. And I think that like one of the Christian values is to find nuance, find compassion for other people. And I think that you're exhibiting a virtue of compassion when you kind of look and say like, hey, I know everybody's history isn't perfect, but I want to get to know this person for who they are now, for who Christ has made them now.
Yeah.
And I think that that's virtuous on its own. And just to once, for I'll say this, I don't think that there's nobody who should ever take body count into consideration. I just don't think for the average person, it should be the main focus of considering someone as a partner.
Okay, well then let's move from the Christian perspective just to the secular then. My argument from the secular perspective is that body count would also be a great indicator for you just based on revolt factor for preference. So most men, they find it revolting that women sleep with tons and tons of men, right? If they find it to be revolting and that's within their preference, there's nothing wrong with that, and they should select past it so that they're not trying to have a relationship with a woman that they're actually revolted by.
Yeah, I think for those men who it's like extremely revolting and there's no way to get around that for them, then they probably should. But I think there's a lot of men who if they had like relevant data about the types of relationships they could cultivate with people who have had higher body counts in the past, that they would probably, and by higher, I mean, we can put a number on that if you really want to, but I'm just talking about people in that like mid-range.
Do you think that if men had relevant data that they could have great and fantastic romantic homosexual relations with other men, that they would suddenly have a preference towards having a homosexual relationship, even if the data said that it would end well for them?
Some of them might lean more towards that.
Almost
yeah, of course.
none. You really
Wow,
think that
that's
men would
okay.
go,
This
I'm
is crazy.
totally straight and attracted to women, but now that I see that I could, like, I don't know, have a bigger house and a pool if I become a homosexual, I'm going to suddenly start having gays. You really think that?
Well, there are people who do that.
Wow, they and there we go. Right there, guys. We are that dumb as men. We are that dumb, guys. That we are so and interesting that she mentioned that. You know why she got to that conclusion, guys? Simple. She's a woman. This is her perspective. This is how she thinks. This is how her brain thinks. That's why she said that men will probably do the same. Because in her mind, if you notice in the data, if she change her preferences based on the data, she'll probably go that way because that's how females think. Resources. Men don't think like that.
Saying,
Now, there are people, most men would not go for that, right? You
I didn't
agree
say
with
most
that?
men.
Yes, you did. You did.
I
You
said,
did. You
think most
admit
men
it.
would go for that, and you were like, yeah.
No. I said that would lean.
You
most
said that.
people
Lady,
more-
you just said that. I just spent.
Say
You
most.
did. Bigger house and a pool if I become a homosexual, I'm going to suddenly start having gays. You really think that?
Well,
There we go. She said it. Oh my god.
there are people who do that. It's kind of like
Yeah, there are people that do that. It's kind of interesting. You just want to deviate the conversation.
Now, there are people, most men would not go for that, right? You
I didn't
agree
say
with
most
that?
men.
You
I didn't say
did,
most.
You did. I said, you think most men would go for that? And you were like, yeah.
No. I said that would lean most people more towards possibly developing a preference for that. So it's not that most men would in fact become gay. Like I didn't say that.
or even engage in homosexual. I mean, if they find homosexuality revolting, there's no amount of data that you're going to show them where they're like, oh, well, now that I see that I could get a bigger pool, the act of gay sex is less revolting to me, right?
I think, have you ever heard the phrase like $20 is $20? I mean, like, come on. Like, yeah, I think people
That's
genuinely.
literally making fun of degenerates.
If that,
Do you say that because it's making fun of degenerates?
You don't think there's actually people, I mean, there's a whole, like, there's actually a wonderful sociologist, and I will shout out Dr. Jenny Stuber for doing a presentation on this. There are people who will go gay for pay. Yeah, absolutely. People are incentivized to do things.
Wow,
if
that's
there's
crazy.
Positive outcomes for them.
Yeah, there are some. I've never put it in a monolith. That there could be some men, like for instance, in the adult porn industry, there's men who have, gays who are apparently straight, according to what they say, right?
Yeah.
They have to have fluffers though come in, and get them to the point where they can do it. Because they can't do it on their own, right? Because they have zero traction there. A lot of them even can find it revolting. Do I think there are some men who would sell out for this? Sure. But that was never a dispute. Yeah. I'm just saying overwhelmingly, no, you're not going to be able to change men's mind by saying, well, this could be a positive romantic outlook that you now have, or you could have a wonderful life with a man of the same sex if you find it revolting. That's not going to change most of their minds.
Do you think most men are, at least
and I mean the
of
overwhelming majority, like I would say like 99.9% or higher, you're not going to change their minds.
Sure. Do you think the overwhelming set of straight men are more adverse to like the thought of themselves having like homosexual intercourse than they are to like a woman with a slightly higher body count number than they prefer?
Yeah.
You think they're more adverse to the homosexual?
Yeah.
Right, exactly. So then when you take that into account with that, you're saying like, okay, well, look, yeah, they might be completely repulsed by the thought of having homosexual sex, but when they're given, other incentives to do so or more information about the facts of what it would cost,
no, it
for
was
them,
still
then
it
they're
still
more
would
likely
not
to get
change
better.
that. It will still not change the fact. It's just again, you're trying to make this argument from the lens of a female, like. If there's an incentive of resources, all of a sudden men would just feel the impulse to just have same-sex relationship. This is so unhinged.
Or not that amount is
Well,
infinitesimal.
let me counter with this real quick, which would just be, I agree that there's a lower subset of men who are revolted by promiscuous women than are by gay sex. But within that subset of men who are revolted by women with a high body count, it's just as bad as the men who are completely revolted by gay sex. It would be the same thing.
You're saying the amount of men is lower?
Yeah, so
or
if you just say the amount of, isn't the amount of men who are repulsed by gay sex going to be higher than the amount of men who are repulsed by women with a high body count?
Right.
It's like, but that really doesn't mean anything, because we're looking at the subset of men who they're equally repulsed, right? They're just repulsion
not sure
is
actually.
repulsion.
I'm not actually convinced of that. I'm far more repulsed by the thought of like eating dog shit than I am at the thought of like eating pickles, and I really hate pickles. So that you're saying like, oh, you're saying
you
that
can have that trivially, right? And maybe I can concede a bit. Maybe I am quibbling a little bit, but what my point is that just because there's a larger subset who finds this to be repulsive with gay sex, there is a large subset of men who find it repulsive that women have a high body count.
I mean,
and I think it's higher than your aversion to pickles, and I think it's less high than the aversion to homosexual sex.
Right, but we can take a poll of the people in this room. Like, would you rather have sex with like a woman who has a high body count, or would you rather have sex with a man? And I think most of the people in this room would be like, I'd rather have sex with a woman with a high body count. So that's just evidence in favor of the hypothesis.
Yeah,
that, like,
but
they would.
But it's to the matter of degree. Like I said, it's higher than your aversion to pickles, right? But perhaps less high than homosexual sex. But the point remains that if they're repulsed by it, and that's within their preference, it seems a perfectly good argument to say it's not my preference, and then just avoid those women altogether because it's outside their preference.
Right, but just like the case with the virgins, what that does is when you say, I'm just averse to it, and like I said, I'm excluding these extreme cases of like aversion. I think that those people who have extreme aversion to this thing, that like the aversion can't really be manipulated or changed or, to have better outcomes, I think those people probably should. And that's the same thing that I would say. Like, I think people who have like a really strong preference against like eating pickles, those people probably shouldn't eat pickles, even though they really want to, have a bigger data set about what it might be like to eat pickles or something like that. So the point stands there is that I think there's far more men who would have, intercourse with a woman with a higher body count. I think that aversion can be manipulated so that their data set can be expanded and they can find happier relationships.
Would you apply that same logic to conversion therapy then?
To convert, in what way?
In the same way that if it is the case that they're opening up their experience to the fact that, they could see that their life would be far less stigmatized if they became heterosexuals or only engaged in heterosexual sex, and that they would have far better outcomes, that there's a lot of gay men who could be convinced, as it were, to do this thing that they found repulsive?
That's an empirical claim. So if you're asking me if
I need one final statement on the body count question from each of you.
Oh, okay. So. Well, I'll just let you go ahead and end, and then I'll
end. Sure. Okay.
And then we'll do chats, then we'll do close.
Okay.
Cool. Yeah, I think in quite a bit of cases, I would be able to say that, for most people, it would be worth it to consider somebody with a higher body count than they have a preference for. I believe when you look at the preferences for body count amount, it's actually pretty low, and it probably falls into that lower end of the spectrum where you have like people who are like from the 1 to 3-ish range. And I think for those people, which I would say is the majority of people, they should open up the range to the kind of middle ground where people tend to have more successful relationships.
Yeah, well, I would just say that my opponent never actually made a really good claim for why men shouldn't care about this, only that
they should.
There's a possibility that some men can be rehabilitated against their revulsion from a secular aspect. That, of course, that would bring up the can of worms of conversion therapy, right? Same thing when it came to the revulsion of homosexual sex. And then further, I would say from the Christian sense, she didn't really make any refutations at all, only saying that, yes, from the Christian angle, it seems that body count itself would be very important for somebody who was looking for virtue in a partner, and that she's not adverse to that at all. So I don't really understand. I still don't really understand the position. I'm trying not to straw man it. I'm trying to steel man it, but I feel like that rendition of events is actually pretty accurate.
There might have to be a further conversation on that because there is still some confusion, but oh well.
Oh well. Yeah, I need to go see the comment section because this lady, it's just. Let's see. In my 30 years on this earth, I have never once heard a legitimate argument as to why is it a good thing for a woman to have a high body count. But good God, they keep on talking in circles like they're gonna convince us of something. Yeah, because what they're trying to do is they're trying to shame you of why you're trying to shame you for trying to shame you. Because you don't like it, right? They want you to like it through shame. No, $5 million wouldn't even make me half homosexual and anything. True, not even $1 billion. Which excuses that are blatantly trying to help the sisterhood. Yep. There we go. This is a good statement right here. No thought to the male interest. No thought at all. We're stupid. We would just go to the resources just because, right? And they wonder why men don't give a shit talking. Yeah. Men will become homosexual if they had a chance to have more successful life. Bro, what? The chick does not live in reality. This is just hell. It's just simply her projection. She's just projecting. This woman's ability to argue has hit rock bottom. She took the I'm not gay, but 20 gold is 20 gold. Yeah. They did a study on married couples and found that women with body counts higher than 0 had near 30% plus chance to get a divorce in the first 5 years. And it kept getting higher as body counts increases. Meanwhile, virgins had a 90% chance of a successful marriage. Her not counts matter. Don't marry someone that isn't virgin. And not only that, guys. Here's the thing. Not only that. Is pair bonding. Remember that. Pair bonding. I have a feeling that she's gonna describe a simp in the video. Crazy. Let me know what you guys think. I'll see you next one.